Good morning. Welcome back to the Bible in Our World today. Hope everyone's doing good today. The things are going well for you. We're going to pick up where we left off last week, talking about the New Jerusalem in chapter 21 of Revelation. Now, I made the statement this would probably be the last video. Well, it'll be the last video on chapter 21. What I failed to think about when I made the statement a week ago is that as we begin chapter 22 of Revelation, there are further descriptions there of what it's like inside the New Jerusalem. And we're going to be looking at those things and starting that probably today. We probably won't get far, but we'll get started into it. And that will be the last chapter of Revelation, and so we'll finish chapter 22, and then I'll just decide where we're going to go from there and what we're going to do. But it's good to have you back with us today as we continue to discuss this marvelous, beautiful, glorious New Jerusalem that one day you and I and all believers in Jesus Christ are going to inhabit. And I mean Old Testament saints and the church age and saints from the tribulation period, and I'm talking about every person from both Old and New Testament that put their faith in either a coming Messiah or a risen Messiah will be in that New Jerusalem where we will worship Jesus Christ for eternity. It's hard for me to get my mind around, my heart around the idea that we're going to be in this marvelous place that God has described for us, and we're going to spend eternity there. And what I want to just mention here before I grab my Bible and notes, we will never be bored for 1 second in eternity. It will be such a marvelous place that God has created for us that there will never be a moment when we are bored with what is happening and what is around us. We are just going to be thrilled through eternity with everything God has created. And I'm of the belief that I don't think that that the Bible has even begun to scratch the surface on what God has for us when we enter in to that heavenly kingdom. So I'm looking forward to that. I hope you are, and what God has for us. If you've got a Bible, I would ask you to take it, and we're going to pick up where we left off last week and continue to talk about chapter 21 and hopefully finish that today. Now, last week we spent most of that time talking about that there was no temple in this New Jerusalem. And I spent some time, and I really believe this, that there is no denominationalism, if you will, in the New Jerusalem, in paradise, in heaven, whatever word you want to use, but we're talking about the New Jerusalem, the new heaven, the new earth. There's no temple there. The only people that are going to be there are those who have been saved by the shed blood of Jesus Christ on the cross of Calvary. That's the only people. And everything else will be removed. In fact, starting in verse 23, where it says there's no temple, I'm going to go back and make a couple statements from my notes last week, but I want to read some of these verses here, starting in verse 23. And the city had no need of the sun, neither of the moon, to shine in it, for the glory of God did lighten it, and the Lamb is the light thereof. And the nations of them which are saved shall walk in the light of it, and the kings of the earth do bring their glory and honor into it. I'll explain that here in a minute. Let me just go on here. I'm going to just finish this chapter. And the gates of it shall not be shut at all by day. There shall be no night there. And they shall bring the glory and the honor of their nation into it. That's almost a repeat of verse 24. And then in verse 27, and there shall in no wise enter into it anything that defileth, neither whatsoever worketh abomination or maketh a lie, but they which are written in the Lamb's book of life. Now, he makes some statements here of things that will not be in that New Jerusalem. Last week I really, as I just said a few minutes ago, elaborated on the fact there's no temple there, and therefore I don't believe at all any denominationalists. The only, as I said, blood-bought saints of the redeemed will be there. But I just want to read a few things here that we just read in these verses that won't be there. And one is, there will be no temple, there will be no sacrifice, there's going to be no sun, there's going to be no moon. The glory of God will be the light of that New Jerusalem. Therefore, there will be no darkness. It said in verse 25 that the gates will not be shut. And then in verse 27, God enumerates certain things called abominations that won't be there. There will be nothing in that city that would be an abomination. So that's the things that God has shared with us that are not going to be in that New Jerusalem. Now, God says he will be the light. What he's referring to here is what I just said a few minutes ago. The glory of God will be the light of that New Jerusalem. So there won't be a need for a sun. There won't be a need for a moon. There won't be need for any of those things, because God himself will sufficiently light that New Jerusalem and the new heaven and the new earth. God will be the source of light for all of that. Now, as we look on in some of these verses, the whole of the city of this New Jerusalem is designed, and I've spoke about this in other videos, to transmit light in all of the beauty and the glory that has been described so far. Light is going to emanate through all of that and be a sufficient source of light for that city. Now, as we look down here, in verse 24, it's an interesting verse. And the nations of them which are saved shall walk in the light of it, and the kings of the earth do bring their glory and honor into it. Now, what is he referring to here in this passage of verse 24? Well, the word for nation in the Greek is ethne, which is the word for Gentiles. This is not a political meaning. Rather, those who are saved as Gentiles, and that would be you and me. And he's talking here about kings, people in authority. And these Gentiles who belong to the non-Jewish races or people will be in that New Jerusalem. See, the New Jerusalem will have both Gentile and Jew within it. What this means is that not only Jewish people, and by the way, much of this pertains to the Jews, this book of Revelation, but it refers to the Jews, but the church is going to be there. That's you and me. The church is going to be there. And any Gentiles not included in those two groups will be there. And the kings of the earth will bring their glory and honor into it. What he is referring to here is that, and I need my notes on this so I don't get this wrong, that those who had a position of honor in this life, those who had a position of honor here on planet Earth, will, as it were, ascribe or dedicate, or whatever word you want to put in there, that glory and honor that they had in this earth that was once theirs. They will ascribe that glory and honor to God himself. And what he is referring to here are kings, people in authority who are saved. Now there will be, I don't know how many, God doesn't say, but there apparently will be a lot, I believe, quite a few of these kings that have been kings throughout the ages who were saved, who believed in Jesus Christ. And they're going to ascribe the glory that they had in this world to Jesus. In other words, any position that they had in this life was because of Jesus Christ. Remember this. Daniel said to Nebuchadnezzar, God sets kings and God removes kings. And that's a true statement. And God does. And so he has set kings in position of authority that have been believers. And they will ascribe their glory to God in this New Jerusalem. See, all the glory, anything that has glory, has it because of God. Because God's made it so. Now, let me move on here. In verse 25 it says, and the gates of it shall not be shut at all by day, and there shall be no night therein. There will never be a time when a gate will be shut. Never. Gates will always be open. There will be no need for them to be shut, because it's already been told in a couple of verses. I'll read this. There's nothing abominable. There is nothing fearful in that realm of the New Jerusalem. There will never be any darkness. You see, you have a city today, a city in biblical times, a city in Jesus' day, they closed the gates at night for protection. There's no need of protection in the New Jerusalem. And you feature that. There's no need of protection because Jesus is the glory of it. He is the power of it. There is nothing for us to fear, because if you read previously in chapter 20, the great white throne judgment, the Antichrist, the false prophet, and that happened before the great white throne judgment, is cast into the lake of fire. Satan is cast into the lake of fire, and all those who have rejected Jesus Christ are cast into the lake of fire. So there is no abominable thing that has to be feared. And so all of these gates of this New Jerusalem will be open continually. And he goes on to say, and they shall bring the glory and honor of the nations into it. And that is another reference to verse 24 that we've already talked about. God just repeats it to emphasize the importance of it. And it is important. It is important. And then he says this, and there shall in no wise enter into it anything that defileth, neither whatsoever worketh abomination, or maketh a lie, but that which are written, but they which are written in the Lamb's book of life. Why is that so? For the very reasons I just said here just a few seconds ago. All things that are abominable, sin itself is going to be cast into the lake of fire. And after that happens, there will be no abominable thing left to affect those who are in the New Jerusalem. So what God is doing is he is eliminating all possibilities of sin and all that pertains to that, all the evilness today that we see around us, all the murders and the robberies and rapes and beatings and all the things that are so bad today in the world we live in. And God has said, I'm going to eliminate all that. I don't know how you look at that, but that's exciting to me. To think, number one, you and I, as we come to this point, are going to be transformed. Where I am declared righteous now, I'm going to be experientially righteous there. And the old nature I have here is going to be left behind. It's not going with me. And I'm going to be transformed into the image of Jesus Christ, and so are you. And so we are going to have a whole new life in this New Jerusalem that he's talking about here. I don't know how you view that, but that's exciting for me. And I'm going to tell you, it should be exciting for you. Just a minute here. It should be exciting for you. You should enjoy it. And you will enjoy it. That's the one thing about this New Jerusalem and all the inhabitants. Everybody there is going to enjoy every single second of eternity in that place. We really are. And to keep this in mind, that God has created it for you and me. For you and me. You know, we go through a lot of suffering in this life. We have all these abominations that I just mentioned, you know, murders and strife and all that kind of stuff. But when we get here, oh, and by the way, in this life, we have tremendous amounts of sickness. I just had a relative who had a son die of the flu. There won't be any flu in the New Jerusalem. There will be absolutely, as verse 25 said in chapter 21, or I'm sorry, verse 27, there will be no abomination. I can't express that enough, that in that place there won't be any kind of suffering. In fact, God has said, I will remove every tear. There will be no sorrow. in this dwelling place that you and I will dwell for eternity. I'm so thankful that Jesus was willing to go to the cross and give his life on the cross for me so that I could have eternal life in this place, in the presence of Jesus Christ. Now, God goes on and he brings this book to a close. He has John write this last chapter, chapter 22, and he starts out with, as I said at the beginning, a further explanation, a further description of this New Jerusalem and what it's going to be like, and especially inside. Now he says, and I'm going to read here just a couple of verses. And he showed me, that is John, he showed John, a pure river of water of life, clear as crystal, proceeding out of the throne of God and of the Lamb. And verse 2, in the midst of the street of it, and on either side of the river, was there the tree of life, which bare 12 manner of fruits, and yielded her fruit every month, and the leaves of the tree were for the healing of the nations. Now, he talks about this river of water of life. This river of water that he's talking about here, it is more pure. It is absolutely more pure and more refreshing than any water you and I have ever had today on planet Earth. Crystal clear. Today our waters are polluted. This will not be polluted. It will be absolutely as pure as water could ever be, because God has made it. What's he say? Showed me a pure river of water of life, clear as crystal. Listen to this part. Proceeding out of the throne of God. I want to tell you, nothing that comes from the throne of God is anything but absolutely pure. Absolutely pure. And so God has given us the very best that he could give. You know, when you think about the water, let me see what time we got here. Let me see if I get paradise. I'm going to say this. I don't know if I'm going to get through this. Paradise would not be perfect without water. It wouldn't be perfect without water. I don't know if I have time here to go back and look at this, but man, let me find it here in Genesis chapter 2. Genesis chapter 2, starting in verse 10. Yeah, let me read this. We'll try to hurry. And a river went out of Eden to water the garden, and from thence it was parted and became into 4 heads. And the name of the first was Pison, that is, it which compasseth the whole land of Havilah, where there is gold. And the gold of that land is good, where is Bellium, and onyx stone. And the name of the second river is Gihon, which is that compasseth the whole land of Ethiopia. And the name of the third river is Hiddekel, which goeth toward the east of Assyria. And the fourth river is Euphrates. And of course we know today the Euphrates, because we have the Euphrates. And what God has shown us is that in the God Garden of Eden, there was perfect pure water that came out of that garden. That garden was meant for eternity. Sin stopped that. But what God now says is that from Genesis here to the end in the book of Revelation, there is a pure river of water of life flowing out of the throne of God. What we lost over here in the Garden of Eden, this perfect water, we get back in the New Jerusalem. God gives it to us. There's some other things that's interesting we're going to see here next week. We've got to end this because I'm out of time. I don't have any more. But it's interesting, the things we lost in the garden because of sin, God gives us back in the New Jerusalem. We serve a wonderful, wonderful God who loves us and cares about us and is created and providing for us for eternity the very absolute best that could ever be. And that's for you and me. We're going to pick up here next week. Thank you for watching. Thank you for being part of the video series. It will only be a few more videos and we'll have chapter 22 done. Then we're going to move on to something different. In the meantime, thank you for watching and may God bless you.